My friend admitted he tanked my chances on marrying my girlfriend because he wanted her more and expected forgiveness. When Trevor looked me straight in the eye across the coffee shop table and said, "I sabotaged your proposal because I thought if you weren't with her, I'd have a shot," I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because my brain couldn't process that level of betrayal from someone I'd known since we were 8 years old. The cup in my hand was still warm, the foam art on my latte forming a perfect heart, which felt like the universe's cruelest joke. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't apologizing. He was waiting, expectant, like he'd just confessed to eating the last slice of pizza and not destroying the future I'd spent 3 years building. That's when I realized he actually believed I would forgive him. I'd been planning to propose to Olivia for 6 months. Every detail was calculated, from the restaurant reservation at La Mer overlooking the harbor to the custom ring I'd saved 18 months to afford. The proposal was set for the evening of our 3rd anniversary, which fell on a Saturday in May. I'd told exactly 3 people about my plan: my mother, my older sister Diane, and Trevor. My mother cried happy tears over the phone. Diane helped me pick the ring setting. Trevor offered to help coordinate everything since he was great with logistics. I should have seen the red flags then, but when you've been friends with someone for 22 years, you don't question their intentions. You trust them with your most vulnerable moments. You tell them about the nightmares you have where she says no. You share your fear that you're not good enough for her. You open yourself completely because that's what best friends are supposed to do. Trevor and I met in 2nd grade when his family moved into the house 3 doors down from mine. We were inseparable through childhood, survived middle school together, navigated high school as a unit. He was the best man at my brother's wedding when we were 19. I helped him move across the state when he got his first real job after college. When my father died unexpectedly when I was 24, Trevor drove 8 hours through the night to be at the funeral. These weren't casual friendship moments. These were the foundations of what I thought was an unbreakable bond. I'd introduced him to Olivia at my company's holiday party 3 years earlier, never imagining that simple introduction would eventually detonate my entire life. Olivia worked in the marketing department of a competing firm, which is how we ended up at the same industry networking events. She had this way of listening to people that made them feel like the only person in the room, and when she laughed, it was this genuine full-body experience that lit up her whole face. We started dating officially 3 weeks after that holiday party, and by month 6, I knew she was the one. Trevor seemed happy for us. He'd join us for dinners, came to her birthday celebration, was always available to hang out as a trio. Looking back now, I can see how he positioned himself, how he'd text her funny memes during work hours, how he'd offer to help her with things when I was traveling for business, how he always had an opinion about what gift I should get her or what restaurant we should try. I thought he was being a good friend, invested in our happiness. I didn't realize he was building his own relationship with her, one carefully designed conversation at a time. The proposal was supposed to happen on a Saturday in May at 8 in the evening. I had the reservation confirmed, the ring in my jacket pocket, my rehearsed speech memorized after practicing it 200 times in my car. I'd asked Trevor to help with one thing: make sure Olivia's best friend Kayla was available to celebrate with us afterward, because I wanted Olivia to have her closest friend there for the moment. Simple enough. Or so I thought. What I didn't know was that Trevor had spent the previous 3 weeks systematically destroying the foundation I'd built. He'd told the restaurant I needed to cancel due to a family emergency and rebooked the table under his own name. He'd convinced my sister that I was having second thoughts, making her question whether she should say anything to me. Most devastatingly, he'd been privately messaging Olivia, planting seeds of doubt about whether I was ready for marriage, sharing concerns about my commitment level, and positioning himself as the trusted friend who only wanted what was best for her. I showed up to the restaurant on that Saturday night, with my heart pounding and my hands slightly sweating despite the cool spring air. The hostess looked confused when I gave my name. "I'm sorry, sir, but we don't have a reservation under that name for this evening." I pulled out my phone, showed her the confirmation email. She called over the manager, a slim man in his 50s named George Castellano, who'd been incredibly helpful when I'd planned everything. He looked at me with genuine sympathy and said, "Someone called earlier this week and canceled this reservation. They said there was a death in the family and you needed to postpone." My stomach dropped. I hadn't canceled anything. Who would do this? The answer didn't even occur to me yet, because my brain was focused on salvaging the evening. I called Olivia, who was already on her way, and suggested we go somewhere else. Her voice sounded distant, distracted, not the excited tone I'd expected. "Actually, can we talk first? Before dinner?" she asked. "There's something we need to discuss." We met at a park near her apartment instead of the restaurant. She was sitting on a bench when I arrived, her posture tense, her usual warm smile replaced with something guarded. Before I could even sit down, she said, "Are you sure you want to get married? To me, specifically?" The question hit me like cold water. Of course I was sure. I was literally carrying the ring that was supposed to make that clear. "What? Why would you even ask that?" I said, sitting beside her. She pulled out her phone and showed me a text thread with Trevor. My best friend had been messaging her for weeks, sharing his observations about me. How I'd mentioned being nervous about commitment, how I'd said I wasn't sure if I was ready to settle down yet, how I'd expressed concerns about whether we were truly compatible long-term. None of it was true, not a single word. But they were convincing because they were phrased as a concerned friend looking out for her best interests, wrapped in enough vague language that she couldn't quite call him out for overstepping. I sat there reading Trevor's messages to my girlfriend, messages filled with subtle manipulation and carefully worded concerns, and I felt something fundamental shift inside me. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a miscommunication. This was calculated. This was intentional. This was my best friend of 22 years actively working to destroy my relationship because he wanted her for himself. I tried to explain to Olivia that none of it was true, that I'd never said any of those things, that I was literally planning to propose to her that very night. I showed her the ring. She cried. Not happy tears, but confused, hurt tears. Why would Trevor say all of this if it wasn't true? She asked. What does he have to gain? I didn't have an answer yet. I was still processing the betrayal myself, trying to understand how someone I trusted completely could do something so fundamentally cruel. We didn't break up that night, but something broke anyway. Trust, maybe. Or the innocent belief that the people closest to you will protect your happiness instead of sabotage it. I confronted Trevor the next morning. He lived in an apartment complex about 15 minutes from my place, one of those modern buildings with floor-to-ceiling windows and a doorman who always looked vaguely disappointed in humanity. I didn't call first. I just showed up at 9 on a Sunday morning and pounded on his door until he answered, still in his pajamas, looking annoyed at being woken up. We need to talk, I said, pushing past him into his living room. He actually had the audacity to look confused, like he couldn't imagine what might be bothering me. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots Olivia had sent me of their text conversation. Want to explain this? I asked, my voice shaking with an anger I'd never felt toward him before. He looked at the messages, and instead of shame or remorse, his face shifted into something defensive. I was just looking out for her, he said. You've been stressed about the proposal. I thought maybe you weren't ready. I was trying to help. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that for about 3 seconds I almost doubted my own reality. Then I remembered the canceled reservation. Did you also help by calling the restaurant and canceling my reservation? The one I told you about in confidence? His face went pale. Got him. He stammered something about thinking I needed more time, about the reservation being too much pressure, about how he was just trying to give me space to think. The excuses piled up like a bad alibi, each one contradicting the last. Trevor, I said slowly, did you do all of this because you want to be with Olivia? The silence that followed was deafening. Then he said it, the thing that made me realize this wasn't a mistake or a misguided attempt to help. I thought if you guys didn't work out, maybe she'd see me differently. I've had feelings for her since you introduced us. You've had everything so easy, and I just thought, maybe this time it would work out for me instead. I left his apartment without another word because I didn't trust myself to speak. 22 years of friendship evaporated in a single conversation. I drove home on autopilot, my mind replaying every interaction the three of us had ever had, seeing all the moments I'd missed. How Trevor always sat next to Olivia when we went out, how he remembered her coffee order, how he'd suggested we all go on a trip together last year and seemed disappointed when Olivia said she wanted it to just be the two of us. The signs had been there, breadcrumbs of obsession I'd mistaken for friendly investment in our relationship. I called my sister Diane when I got home, needing to talk to someone who would understand the magnitude of what had just happened. She was quiet for a long time after I explained everything. Then she said, "He called me 3 weeks ago and said you were having doubts. I've been worried sick, wondering if I should say something to you. I can't believe he manipulated me too." Olivia and I tried to move forward, but the damage was done. Every conversation felt strained, like we were both walking on eggshells around the ghost of Trevor's interference. She wanted to believe me, wanted to trust that I'd never expressed those doubts, but he'd planted the seeds so effectively that she couldn't completely let them go. "How do I know you're not just saying what I want to hear now?" she asked one night, 3 weeks after the failed proposal. We were sitting in her living room, the space between us on the couch feeling like a canyon. "How do I know Trevor wasn't actually telling the truth about your concerns?" I didn't have a better answer than, because I love you and I'm telling you the truth. Sometimes that's all you have, but sometimes it's not enough. We decided to take a break. Not a breakup, just space. She needed time to process. I needed time to grieve the friendship I'd lost and figure out who I was without Trevor in my life. During that break, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Trevor's betrayal just fade into the background like an unfortunate incident we all moved past. I wanted him to face consequences. I wanted Olivia to see, with absolute clarity, that everything he'd told her was a calculated lie. I needed proof that would be undeniable, something that would expose his true intentions and vindicate my truth. I started by documenting everything. I created a timeline of events with dates, times, and screenshots. I included the confirmation email from the restaurant, the cancellation they'd received, and the fact that Trevor had admitted to making that call. I compiled every text message he'd sent to Olivia, every conversation where he'd undermined our relationship while pretending to be a concerned friend. But I needed more. I needed something that would show this wasn't just a one-time mistake, but a pattern of manipulation. I reached out to a mutual friend named Alex Thornton, someone who'd known both Trevor and me since college. Alex was a therapist now, someone trained to see patterns in human behavior and understand manipulation tactics. I met him at a quiet bar on a Thursday evening and showed him everything I'd compiled. He read through the messages slowly, his professional demeanor cracking occasionally with flashes of genuine anger. "This is textbook emotional manipulation," he said, tapping one of Trevor's messages to Olivia. "See how he phrases everything as concern? How he never directly tells her not to trust you, but plants questions that make her doubt? This is sophisticated psychological warfare." I asked him if he'd be willing to review everything and provide a professional assessment, something I could show to Olivia that wasn't just my emotional interpretation of events. He agreed, and 3 days later, he sent me a detailed analysis of Trevor's communication patterns, highlighting the manipulation tactics and explaining how they were designed to erode trust. I also consulted with a lawyer, Patricia Donovan, who'd been practicing family and interpersonal law for 12 years. I wanted to know if what Trevor had done constituted any form of legal interference or if there were grounds for a restraining order if his behavior escalated. She reviewed the documentation during our consultation, her expression growing increasingly serious. "This is definitely tortious interference with a relationship," she explained. "While it's not criminal, it's civil wrongdoing. He intentionally interfered with your prospective economic advantage, which in some states includes marriage prospects. The canceled reservation alone could be considered sabotage, and the manipulative messages show clear intent to damage your relationship." She told me that while I could potentially pursue civil action, the better route was to create a comprehensive record of everything in case I needed legal protection later. "Document every interaction with him going forward," she advised. "Don't engage directly. Don't give him ammunition to twist things." Armed with the therapist's assessment and the lawyer's advice, I prepared to show Olivia the full scope of what Trevor had done. But before I could schedule that conversation, Trevor reached out to me. He sent a text message asking to meet for coffee, saying he wanted to clear the air and explain things better. Every instinct told me not to go, but I saw an opportunity. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop on the following Monday at 3 in the afternoon. Before the meeting, I did something I'd never done before. I set up my phone to record audio. I wanted documentation of whatever he said, proof in his own words of his intentions and actions. The lawyer had confirmed this was legal in our state as long as one party to the conversation knew about the recording, which I did since I was that party. That's how I ended up across from Trevor at that coffee shop, listening to him confess that he'd sabotaged my proposal because he wanted Olivia for himself. The recording captured everything. His admission that he'd canceled the restaurant reservation. His explanation that he'd been messaging Olivia for weeks to undermine her trust in me. His belief that if I weren't in the picture, she'd eventually see him as a romantic option. And most damning of all, his expectation that I would forgive him because we've been friends forever, and everyone makes mistakes. He actually said, "Come on, we can get past this. You'll find someone else eventually, and we can laugh about this someday." The sheer audacity of expecting forgiveness for something so calculated and cruel left me momentarily speechless. Then I said the only thing that felt appropriate. "We're done. We're not friends anymore. Don't contact me, don't contact Olivia, and stay out of both our lives." His face went through a rapid evolution of emotions: shock, anger, disbelief, and finally something resembling panic. "You're seriously going to throw away 22 years of friendship over a girl?" he asked, his voice rising. The people at nearby tables were starting to look over. I kept my voice calm and level. "You threw it away when you decided your feelings for her were more important than your loyalty to me. You threw it away when you lied to her about me. You threw it away when you sabotaged the most important night of my life. I'm just acknowledging what you already did." I stood up to leave, and he grabbed my arm. "Don't do this," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "I made a mistake. I'll apologize to Olivia. I'll fix it." I pulled my arm away. "You can't fix this. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice you made every single day for weeks. Own it." I walked out while he was still sitting there, stunned into silence. I sent the recording to Olivia that evening with a message. "I need you to listen to this when you have privacy and time. It's a conversation I had with Trevor today. I'm not asking you to forgive me or come back. I just need you to know the truth." She called me 90 minutes later, crying so hard she could barely speak. When she finally got words out, she said, "I believed him. I actually believed him when he said you had doubts. I'm so sorry. I should have trusted you." We talked for 3 hours that night, working through the damage Trevor had caused, examining how we'd both been manipulated by someone we thought cared about us. The break had given us both perspective, and instead of destroying our relationship completely, Trevor's betrayal somehow clarified what we meant to each other. We decided to try again, but this time with complete honesty and without Trevor's poisonous influence lurking in the background. But Trevor wasn't done. 2 weeks after I cut him off, he started showing up places where he knew Olivia would be: her gym, her favorite coffee shop, the grocery store near her apartment. He'd approach her, try to start conversations, play the victim who'd been unfairly abandoned by his best friend over a misunderstanding. Olivia documented each incident and told him explicitly to stop contacting her. He ignored her requests. That's when I knew we needed more than just severed ties. We needed legal intervention. Patricia Donovan helped us file for a restraining order based on his pattern of stalking behavior and unwanted contact. The hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday afternoon, 4 weeks after my confrontation with Trevor at the coffee shop. If you are enjoying this story already, please subscribe to see more stories like this. At the hearing, we presented everything: the timeline of his manipulation, the therapist's assessment, the recorded confession, documentation of his continued contact after being told to stop, and witness statements from people who'd seen him following Olivia. The judge, an older woman named Margaret Chen— wait, I need to avoid that name. Let me use a different one. The judge, an older woman named Margaret Holloway, who'd been on the bench for 15 years, reviewed everything with a grim expression. Trevor's lawyer tried to argue that this was just a friendship dispute blown out of proportion, that Trevor had apologized and meant no harm. Judge Holloway cut him off mid-sentence. Your client systematically sabotaged an engagement, lied to multiple parties, and when confronted, continued to harass one of the victims. This isn't a friendship dispute. This is obsessive behavior that shows a concerning pattern. She granted a temporary restraining order requiring Trevor to stay at least 500 feet away from both Olivia and me, with a permanent order hearing scheduled for 3 months later. The restraining order should have been the end of it, but Trevor's obsession ran deeper than either of us realized. He violated the order within a week by sending Olivia a long email from a new account, detailing how much he loved her and how he knew they were meant to be together. The email was unhinged, filled with references to moments they'd shared that he'd clearly built up in his mind as romantic connections that only existed in his imagination. She forwarded it to Patricia immediately, and we filed a police report. The detective assigned to the case, William Foster, had been with the department for 19 years and specialized in stalking cases. He took one look at the email and said, "This is escalation. He's not backing down. He's doubling down. We need to take this seriously." Detective Foster helped us implement additional safety measures. Olivia changed her route to work and started parking in different locations each day. We both documented any attempted contact, no matter how small. I installed security cameras at my apartment, and she did the same at hers. It felt extreme, but Detective Foster emphasized that restraining order violations often escalated when the subject felt they were losing control. He built a fantasy in his head where you two would end up together, he explained to Olivia during one meeting. Every step you take away from that fantasy feels like betrayal to him. That's when people become dangerous. His words proved prophetic when, 3 weeks later, Trevor showed up at Olivia's workplace during her lunch break. He walked into the lobby of her building like he had every right to be there, carrying flowers and wearing what Olivia later described as this desperate, manic smile. Her receptionist, a sharp woman named Linda Walters, who'd been briefed on the restraining order, immediately called security while keeping Trevor talking. Olivia was in her office on the 4th floor when she got the alert. She watched from her window as building security escorted Trevor out while he shouted about how he just wanted to talk, how everyone was overreacting, how Olivia would understand if she'd just give him 5 minutes. Security called the police. Detective Foster arrived within 20 minutes and arrested Trevor for violating the restraining order. That arrest should have been a wake-up call, but Trevor seemed incapable of accepting reality. The court date for the restraining order violation was set for a Monday in August, 3 months after the initial order was granted. By this point, Olivia and I had been back together for 2 months, carefully rebuilding trust and moving forward, despite the chaos Trevor continued to create from the periphery. The night before the court appearance, Olivia and I sat in my living room going over our testimony with Patricia. "Tomorrow, you both need to be calm, factual, and clear," she advised. "Let the evidence speak. Don't get emotional on the stand, even though what he did is infuriating. The facts are damning enough." She was right. We had messages, recordings, witness statements, security footage, police reports, and a clear pattern of obsessive, manipulative behavior. Trevor had built his own prison with his actions. We just needed to make sure the judge saw it clearly. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with about 30 seats for observers, and that particular smell of old wood and industrial cleaner that seems universal to legal buildings. Trevor sat at the defendant's table with his lawyer, a nervous-looking man in his 30s named James Keller, who kept shuffling papers like they might somehow reorganize themselves into a better defense. Trevor looked awful, right? He'd lost weight, his clothes hung loosely on his frame, and he had dark circles under his eyes that spoke to sleepless nights. Part of me almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I remembered standing in that park with Olivia, watching her cry over his lies, and the sympathy evaporated. The judge, a different one from the initial hearing, was a stern man in his 60s named Richard Blackwood, who had a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. The prosecution went first, laying out the timeline of events with brutal efficiency. They played the audio recording of Trevor's confession at the coffee shop. They showed the email he'd sent from the fake account. They presented security footage of him entering Olivia's workplace in violation of the restraining order. Each piece of evidence landed like a hammer blow, and I watched Trevor's expression shift from defensive to resigned. His lawyer tried to argue that Trevor was going through a mental health crisis and needed treatment, not punishment. Judge Blackwood listened impassively, then asked, "Has your client sought mental health treatment in the 3 months since the initial restraining order?" The lawyer hesitated. "Well, He's been in contact with a therapist. Has he actively pursued treatment? The judge pressed. Another hesitation. Not in a formal, ongoing capacity, no. Judge Blackwood made a note. When it was time for Olivia to testify, she walked to the stand with her head high, her voice steady, despite the tremor I could hear underneath. She described the weeks of manipulation, the doubt Trevor had planted, the fear she'd felt when he started showing up at her regular locations. I thought he was my friend, she said at one point. I trusted him. Finding out that friendship was just a strategy to get close to me made me question every relationship I have. Trevor's lawyer tried to cross-examine her, suggesting she'd somehow led Trevor on or given him mixed signals. Patricia objected immediately, and Judge Blackwood sustained it with a sharp look at the defense attorney. Let's stick to relevant questions about the violation of the restraining order, he said. The defense had no more questions. My testimony was shorter but equally straightforward. I described 22 years of friendship destroyed by obsession and manipulation. I explained the impact on my relationship with Olivia, the trust that had to be rebuilt, the constant vigilance required because Trevor refused to accept boundaries. When Trevor's lawyer asked if I'd ever forgiven Trevor for past mistakes in our friendship, I said, past mistakes were forgotten car keys and borrowed money not returned. This wasn't a mistake. This was a calculated campaign to destroy my relationship because he wanted what I had. There's no forgiveness for that. Judge Blackwood nodded slightly, making another note. After my testimony, the judge called a brief recess before the final arguments. During the recess, I saw Trevor trying to catch Olivia's eye from across the courtroom. She refused to look at him, keeping her gaze fixed on Patricia and me. His lawyer was speaking to him in low, urgent tones, probably explaining how badly things were going. When court resumed, the prosecution's closing argument was concise. Trevor had shown a clear pattern of obsessive behavior, violated multiple boundaries, ignored explicit instructions to stop contact, and demonstrated no genuine remorse or understanding of his actions. The defense argument was weaker, focusing on Trevor's previously clean record and his willingness to seek help. Judge Blackwood listened to both, then delivered his ruling without deliberation. Mr. Watson, he said, addressing Trevor directly, you have engaged in a pattern of manipulative and obsessive behavior that crosses multiple legal and ethical lines. You sabotaged a friend's relationship out of selfish desire. When confronted, you continued to harass and stalk the subjects of your obsession despite clear legal boundaries. Your actions show a fundamental disrespect for other people's autonomy and choices. He paused, looking down at his notes. I'm extending the restraining order to a permanent status. You are to have no contact, direct or indirect, with either Ms. Olivia Brennan or Mr. Nathan Gallagher for a period of 10 years. You are sentenced to 90 days in county jail for violation of the original restraining order, with credit for time served. Additionally, you are required to complete a court-mandated mental health evaluation and follow all treatment recommendations. Do you understand these terms? Trevor nodded, his face pale. His voice was barely audible when he said, Yes, Your Honor. As we left the courthouse, I felt something release in my chest that I hadn't realized I'd been holding. It wasn't joy exactly, more like relief. Relief that there were consequences. Relief that Olivia and I could move forward without looking over our shoulders constantly. Relief that the legal system had seen through Trevor's manipulation to the truth underneath. Olivia squeezed my hand as we walked to the car. Is it really over? She asked. I thought about the 10-year restraining order, the jail sentence, the mandatory treatment. Yeah, I said. I think it finally is. We drove to her apartment in comfortable silence, the weight of the past months slowly lifting. That evening, we sat on her balcony watching the sunset, something we'd done countless times before Trevor's interference, but hadn't felt comfortable doing in months. Do you think he'll actually get help? Olivia asked, her head resting on my shoulder. I considered the question honestly. I don't know. I hope so, for his sake. But it's not our problem anymore. She was quiet for a moment, then said, I keep thinking about all the time we wasted being suspicious of each other because of his lies. All those weeks we could have been together but weren't. I turned to face her. We're together now. That's what matters. She smiled, the first genuine, unguarded smile I'd seen from her in months. It reminded me why I'd wanted to marry her in the first place. All the qualities that made me fall in love with her were still there, just temporarily buried under the damage Trevor had caused. 3 months later, on a Saturday evening in November, I took Olivia back to La Mer, the restaurant where the original proposal was supposed to happen. George Castellano, the manager who'd been so apologetic about the canceled reservation, had been following our story and reached out personally to offer us the same table, no charge. I felt terrible about what happened, he'd told me on the phone. I should have verified the cancellation better. Let me make it right. I accepted his offer, touched by the gesture. This time, there was no Trevor to sabotage things, no manipulative texts to undermine Olivia's trust, no canceled reservations or planted doubts, just the two of us, a good meal, and the future we'd fought to protect. I proposed over dessert, pulling out the same ring I'd bought 18 months earlier. My hands shook slightly, not from fear of rejection, but from the magnitude of the moment. Everything we'd been through made this more meaningful somehow, like we'd earned this happiness by refusing to let Trevor's betrayal destroy it. "Olivia Brennan," I said, my voice steady despite my nerves. "You've shown me what real trust looks like, what forgiveness and strength and courage look like. I fell in love with you 3 years ago, and I fall more in love with you every day. Will you marry me?" She was crying before I finished the question, happy tears this time, nodding so enthusiastically she couldn't speak. When she finally found her voice, she said simply, "Yes. God. Yes." The wedding was small and intimate, held the following spring in a garden venue surrounded by people who genuinely loved and supported us. My sister Diane was there, apologizing again for doubting me when Trevor had planted his seeds. Olivia's best friend Kayla gave a toast about resilience and trust. Alex Thornton, the therapist who'd helped us understand the manipulation, attended with his partner. Detective Foster sent a card congratulating us and noting that Trevor had completed his jail sentence and was reportedly in ongoing therapy. Patricia Donovan came to the reception and joked that she rarely got to see happy endings in her line of work. Looking around at everyone gathered, I realized that Trevor's betrayal had actually clarified who our real people were, the ones who stood by us, the ones who helped us fight, the ones who celebrated our victory. During the reception, as Olivia and I danced our first dance as a married couple, she whispered, "Do you ever think about him? About Trevor?" I considered lying, but we'd built this relationship on honesty, especially after everything. "Sometimes," I admitted. "I think about the friendship we had before everything went wrong. I mourn that sometimes, that loss." She nodded against my shoulder. "Me too. I mourn the friend I thought I had. But I'm grateful too, in a weird way." I pulled back to look at her. "Grateful?" She smiled softly. "His betrayal showed me what we're made of. It showed me that you fight for what you love, that you stand up for truth, that you don't just fold when things get hard. I might have married you before all this, but now I know exactly who I'm marrying. No doubts, no questions, just certainty." A year after the wedding, I ran into someone who knew Trevor at a professional conference. The encounter was brief, just a conversation at the hotel bar, but the person mentioned that Trevor had moved to another state and was apparently doing better. "He talks about you sometimes," the acquaintance said carefully. "Says he lost his best friend and learned some hard lessons about obsession and boundaries." I didn't ask for more details. Whatever Trevor's journey was, it wasn't mine to follow anymore. I'd grieved the friendship, processed the betrayal, and moved forward. Olivia and I had built a life together that didn't have room for people who'd tried to tear us apart. We had our own home now, careers that fulfilled us, plans for the future that excited us. The shadows of what happened would probably always be there in some small way, but they didn't define us anymore. Sometimes people ask me if I ever felt guilty about pursuing the restraining order or the criminal charges against Trevor. If I ever wondered if I'd been too harsh on someone who'd been my friend for 2 decades. The answer is simple, no. Because Trevor didn't make a single impulsive mistake. He made dozens of calculated choices over weeks and months, each one designed to hurt me and manipulate Olivia. He chose his obsession over our friendship. He chose deception over honesty. He chose to violate boundaries even after facing legal consequences. Those weren't the actions of someone who deserved leniency or second chances. Those were the actions of someone who needed to face the full weight of what he'd done, so he might actually change. The last I heard, Trevor completed his court-mandated therapy, and the 10-year restraining order remains in effect. Detective Foster told me that statistically, people who face real consequences for stalking behaviors are less likely to reoffend, especially when combined with genuine therapeutic intervention. I hope that's true for Trevor. I hope he found a way to deal with whatever drove him to sabotage someone he claimed to care about. But whether he did or didn't, it's not my concern anymore. I spent too many years investing in that friendship to spend any more energy on its ghost. Olivia and I are expecting our first child this fall, a daughter we're going to name Sophie Marie. When we told our families, my mother cried happy tears again, just like she did when I first told her about the proposal plan all those years ago. This time, though, there's no Trevor to interfere. No one to sabotage our joy or plant seeds of doubt. Just genuine love and support from people who proved they deserved to be in our lives. Sophie will grow up hearing the story someday, probably when she's old enough to understand complexity and betrayal and the importance of choosing your people wisely. We'll tell her about how her parents fought for their relationship, how they didn't let someone else's manipulation destroy what they'd built, how they chose each other every day, even when it was hard. Looking back now, from this place of hard-won happiness, I can see the whole arc clearly. The blind trust I had in Trevor, the devastation of his betrayal, the fight to expose the truth and protect ourselves, the legal battles, and finally, the peace of moving forward without him. If someone had told me 3 years ago that my best friend would try to steal my girlfriend and that I'd end up seeking legal protection from him, I would have laughed at the absurdity. But life doesn't ask permission before it breaks you. It just does. What matters is how you put yourself back together afterward, what pieces you keep, and what you leave behind. I left behind the version of myself that trusted blindly. I left behind the naivety that assumed good intentions from everyone. But I kept the ability to love deeply. I kept my integrity. I kept my fight. Trevor wanted forgiveness. He expected it, actually, like our decades of friendship entitled him to absolution regardless of how badly he'd hurt me. But forgiveness isn't something you're owed. It's something you earn through genuine remorse, changed behavior, and time. Trevor never showed real remorse. He showed regret at getting caught, frustration at facing consequences, and desperation to maintain his fantasy. That's not the foundation for forgiveness. Maybe someday, years from now, when enough time has passed and enough healing has occurred, I'll find some version of peace with what happened. But it won't be forgiveness in the way he wanted. It'll be acceptance that someone I loved as a brother chose to betray me, and I chose to survive it. The ring sits on Olivia's finger now, the same ring I bought 2 years ago with 18 months of savings. It survived the sabotaged proposal, the weeks of separation, the legal battles, and came out the other side exactly where it was always meant to be. Sometimes she twists it absently when she's thinking, the diamonds catching the light, and I remember that moment at the restaurant when the hostess said they didn't have my reservation. How my stomach dropped. How I thought the night was ruined. I didn't know then that we'd face something so much bigger than a canceled reservation. That we'd have to fight for our relationship in ways I'd never imagined. That the friend I trusted most would become the enemy we needed legal protection from. But we survived it. We came through it stronger and more certain of each other. And that's worth more than any easy proposal story could ever be. If Trevor taught me anything, it's that time and history don't make someone trustworthy. Actions do. Choices do. The way someone treats you when they want something you have reveals their true character. And the way someone responds when caught in betrayal shows you everything you need to know about whether they deserve a place in your future. Trevor failed every test. He chose himself over friendship. He chose obsession over respect. He chose manipulation over honesty. And when caught, he chose to double down instead of genuinely change. Those choices cost him everything: the friendship, the respect, his freedom for 90 days, and any chance of being part of our lives. I didn't take those things from him. He surrendered them through his own actions. I just made sure there were consequences. So when people ask if I regret how things turned out, if I wish I'd handled things differently or given Trevor another chance, I tell them this: I regret that it happened at all. I regret that someone I loved could be capable of such calculated cruelty. I regret the pain it caused Olivia and the months of our lives that were consumed by legal proceedings and fear. But I don't regret fighting back. I don't regret pursuing every legal avenue to protect us. I don't regret refusing to forgive someone who never truly asked for forgiveness, only for permission to avoid consequences. Because some betrayals are too fundamental to overlook. Some wounds are too deep to just move past without acknowledgement and justice. Trevor wanted me to minimize what he'd done, to accept his actions as an understandable mistake between old friends. I refused. And that refusal, that insistence on truth and consequences, is the only reason Olivia and I are where we are today, married, expecting our first child, and genuinely happy. Trevor didn't just tank my chances at marrying my girlfriend. He tried to destroy the foundation of trust we'd built. But we rebuilt it stronger, without him. And now we're building a life he'll never touch. That's the real ending. Not revenge, not forgiveness, but moving forward into a future where his shadow gets smaller every day until it disappears completely. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.